Okay, welcome to our Erev Shabbat Parashat special edition class. And Chodesh Tov, of course, was Chodesh Kislev, Parashat Toledot. Question of the day is, or statement, one of the best kept secrets in Jewish history. We try to approach and tackle today the incredible story of the Berachot of Yitzhak Avinu to his son or sons, and the dramatic events leading up to that moment of fate. We will not this morning necessarily discuss the concept of Bechorah. We'll forego the interesting discussion of Yaakov and Rivka and this possible approach, you might say, of trickery or let's say non-straightforward approach. We'll bypass that for now and get towards the end of that scene, of that moment, what brings us to, I think, the most astounding questions and some of the most in all the narratives of Sefer Bereshit. So, of course, Yaakov comes in with the fur on his arms like Esav, smells like Esav, but he sounds like Yaakov. Yitzhak is not so clear on what's going on, back and forth a couple of times. Finally, he tastes the food that he brought him, and he starts to get ready for the beracha, and then finally he gives him a beracha. And then once the beracha is over, Yaakov leaves, Esav enters, and then comes the pasuk. He asks, "Please bless my father." And Yitzhak said, "Who are you?" And he said, "I'm Esav." And Yitzhak apparently recognized that indeed the second person was Esav. And the reaction, Perek Kaf Zayin, chapter 27, Pasuk Lamed Gimal, Yaakov enters. No. Yitzhak realizes that it was indeed Esav, and he reacts as follows: "Vayihara Yitzhak harada gedola ad meod, vayomed mi'efo hu hasatzayid, vayabeli va'ochal mikol b'terem tabo, va'barechehu gam baruch yiheh." Yitzhak feared a mighty, awesome, terrible, perplexed, confused fear. Why in the world was Yitzhak so afraid? So he made a mistake. So there was a mix-up. So there was some possible chicanery or maybe, let's say, wise strategy that went on here. There was confusion. Fine, it's surprising, it's difficult, it's disappointing. The Torah is not mincing words over here. It was a harada gedola ad meod. The root word, het resh dalet, fear or trembling, really, three times in this very pasuk, or twice, I'm sorry, but gedola ad meod, incredibly awesome type of fear. Why? What's to be afraid of so much? And we could add on a few other obvious questions. Just prior to this fear was Yitzhak thinking it was Esav and offering the beracha. Apparently, the beracha before he passed. Apparently, the beracha that we've all been waiting for, and the beracha that Rivka was trying to manipulate Yaakov to receive. Are we to believe that Yitzhak Avinu really believed that Esav was the one of his two sons worthy for a beracha, and the, so to speak, chosen one to take the mantle from himself, passed down from Abraham, his father, to Yitzhak, and then to Esav, the three forefathers, Abraham, Yitzhak, and Esav. Is that what Yaakov or Yitzhak Avinu truly envisioned? It certainly seems to be the case. And so we have our work cut out for us to try to unravel and try to understand what is going on. But what we can certainly ascertain from all of this is that Yaakov, Yitzhak Avinu rather, was in the dark. Apparently, he was not privy to what his wife was privy to. Apparently, the berachot, whatever he was envisioning, were meant for Yaakov as Rivka knew. And apparently, Yitzhak never knew this. He was never aware. And apparently, his wife never shared the insight. And let's take it back, therefore, to the original birth of the two boys. This is the beginning of our Parashat. This is when and Rivka knew that there's more than one child, and she's having difficulty, and she consulted with God. Now we know that Rivka and Manu is now listed as one of the 7 prophetesses, the female prophets that we know of in our history. And so therefore the Mefarshim, commentators on the spot, tell us that she was communicated to through a malach or some other manner. She had a premonition, some form of Ruach HaKodesh. It was not Nebuah, it was not direct prophecy, but nevertheless, she was given a message. And the message she was given is as follows. It's the famous information that Kadosh Baruch Hu offered Rivka Imenu. He told her, in short, 2 children, 2 boys in your womb will be 2 great nations, and brief, the younger one will be the chosen one. So she was privy to an incredible prediction and truism of the fate of Am Yisrael, the future of mankind, and where these 2 sons that would eventually be born from her would go, what direction they would take, and who would be deserving, therefore, of Beracha, and who would be the one to which Yitzhak Avinu would pass the baton. She knew from the beginning it was Yaakov. For some reason, Rivka chose not to share this prophecy, this insight, the secret information with her husband Yitzhak, the great prophet. For some reason, she concealed what she knew, as critical as it was, and she kept it under wraps all these years, to the extent that in the moment of fate, well over 150 years later, Yitzhak was gripped with that incredible fear and trembling. Why? Why didn't Rivka reveal what she knew to Yitzhak? So let's try to get a vantage point and place ourselves in Yitzhak Avinu's mindset for a moment and understand his perspective. We certainly understand that Yitzhak Avinu had a vision for Esav. Was it for him to carry on the chosenness from his father Abraham to himself and then to Esav? The answer is a resounding no. A resounding no. We know this because even when Yitzhak Avinu told Esav, go fetch me a great catch that you normally do for you to hunt and seize some animal and then give it to me. The words that he used to Esav was Ba'abur tibarechani nafshi. Before I die, I would like nafshi personally to offer you a beracha. That, first of all, was a personal gesture. And second of all, that beracha, as we found out later, was a very, you can say, material-oriented beracha. Look at the climax of the beracha when Yitzhak spoke to Yaakov, but thought he was speaking to Esav. From that, we could understand what was the ultimate blessing that he was deciding to bestow upon him. And we say this in weddings, it's a famous pasuk, V'yiten lecha Elohim, Matalon shamayim, v'shmenei haaretz, v'rov dechad v'tirosh, etc. It was a blessing of land, rich land, agriculture. It was a blessing afterwards. Yabducha amim, v'yishtachavu lecha b'na'omim, hevech hevi lahecha, v'yishtachavu lecha b'nei orech arur, m'achecha baruch. Power, prestige, military prowess, and general blessing. These are all physical type blessings. They're material. They're blessings of wealth, sovereignty, power, and strength. Nowhere here are there blessings of chosenness of the land of Israel, of spirituality, of godliness, of carrying on the mission started by Abraham and given to him. And therefore it's clear that Yitzhak was not giving Esav what you would think the next generation, the third generation of Jewish history, would receive in totality. Furthermore, we know that eventually when he sent away Yaakov, after this whole scene unraveled, and then Rivkah suggested, I want to send him to get a good wife somewhere, but she already also knew that Esav was planning to murder Yaakov, and she was trying to save him. She suggested send him away. And in sending him away, Yitzhak blessed Yaakov and said, knowing he was Yaakov at this time, V'yiten lecha et berit Abraham. God should bless you and give you the covenant of Abraham. That's who he offered it to. And of course, we know from the earlier part of the Parashat, describing the two young men, that Yaakov Abinu was Ishtam Yoshev Ohalim. Yitzhak Abinu, the prophet, was not blind in understanding. Quite the contrary. He was insightful and very understanding. And he knew that Yaakov Abinu was the man of the book. He knew he was Yoshev Ohalim. He understood he was on the verge of prophecy at some point in his young life. He related to that because he himself became a prophet, did Yitzhak. And therefore he understood, of course, who Yaakov was relative to Esav. And yet, he was set on, almost obsessed with, offering this material barakah to Esav. And therefore we must conclude that there was a vision by Yitzhak Abinu, one that I like to call, for anyone who's been in my classes in the past, the two-state solution, where this nation would be run by a double-headed leader, one head being the one in charge of the military, of the power, would be bestowed upon physical blessing, sustenance, and that would be that segment, that faction of the nation's objective. The other would be Yaakov, and that would be the spiritual, the leadership, the educational, the guidance, the divine, godly, value-driven portion of the nation. That was Yitzhak Abinu's vision. But why? Where did this all come from? Why couldn't he just see clear that it was Yaakov and just let go? Understand that Esav was not the person to carry on the chosen mission. Just move on and give it to Yaakov. And the reason is his father, Abraham Abinu. For we have such a similar scene that we read 2 parashiyot ago in Vayera, where Ishmael, who was the son of only Abraham, not of Sarah, was apparently involved in inappropriate activity. And Sarah saw this. She saw him misaheh with her son Yitzhak. Negative connotations. And Sarah said, Garesh ben ha'amazot. Please throw this woman out, meaning Hagar. Ki lo yirah, she's not going to inherit and Yitzhak. Ishmael will not take the mantle, inherit the throne of Abraham. The reaction of Abraham Abinu was Veyera Adaba Be'anei Abraham Al Odot Beno. This was terrible, this suggestion. It was almost diabolical. It was Ra in its essence. It was a destructive suggestion that his wife just made in his eyes. And why is that? After all, it was Ishmael and Sarah. In very brief terminology, the Torah described what Sarah saw. He was clearly not the moral figure that we needed to be the next generation after Abraham. And yet, Abraham Abinu saw and said as follows: I spent my entire life spreading the word of God in the paganistic world. I have brought under the fold, as the Mefarshim, the Rambam speak about, tens of thousands of souls who I enlightened and brought under the wings of God. Those that were the furthest away from godliness. I am living proof that it's possible for man to elevate himself from lowliness to holiness. I've done it. I've lived it. I know I can do it, and this is my son. I believe in him, and I believe that it's possible because I am living proof that a person can be elevated and cultivated and formed and molded and guided. And therefore, Vayera Hadavar. This was terrible, said Abraham. And of course, God said, no, sir. No, sirree. Your wife is correct. Whatever your wife says, Shema B'Kvolah, Ki B'Yishaki Karela Chazara. Because Sarai Meru had greater insight and perception in this regard than her husband, Abraham. So, ironically, she was the visionary here. And she understood that this next generation had to come from both a combination of Abraham and Sarah, that type of lineage, that type of biological background. And she understood who Ishmael was. And she said, there's no way. My son is chosen. God said, of course, you're correct. Abraham Abinu, open your eyes, listen to your wife, and understand that you're warned in this regard. However, Yitzhak, his greatest pupil, his greatest Talmid, who learned all the values of life and godliness from his father Abraham, inherited that trait. And therefore, Yitzhak Abinu saw his son, understood his son, loved his son. And you could also add on from the Pesukim that we have been given in the beginning of our Parashat, he loved him because there was sayid, trappings in his mouth. Some say because he actually gave his trappings, his food to the mouth of Ishaq, his father, and served him all the time. Some say the trappings or the trickery was at the mouth of Esav, and maybe he pulled the wool over his eyes to some extent. I like to say the word key here possibly does not mean because, rather sometimes the way it's used as when. Ki sayid b'fiv. At the times that there was this hunting ability, this generosity, this respect, that's when Yitzhak was enamored. That's when he was captured. That's what he said. You see my son, he has so much potential. He can do so much. I can build this boy. I believe in him. And therefore Yitzhak developed his two-state solution theory. And Rivka, she never bothered. She understood that there was just no way. This is the son of Abraham Abinu. You can't convince this man. Yes, Sarah convinced Abraham, but that's because she wasn't the mother. Me, I'm also the mother. And Ishmael, not too many positive traits described to us by the Torah. Esav had the goods to some extent. There's no way I will ever be able to enlighten him the way he should be. My husband's going to have to discover this on his very own. And therefore, she orchestrated this entire scene. And therefore, she manipulated all of these circumstances through his son, Yaakov, to get the message to Yitzhak and let him discover it on his very own. And at that great moment of faith, Yitzhak Abinu, as he understood in a split second, when Yaakov left and Esav came back in, was gripped with a terrifying, trembling fear. He now reflected on the entire lives of his children, on all these years, 60 years, worth a flaw of misunderstanding, on his vision, on his plan, and understood that his wife all these years knew what he didn't know. And he was gripped with fear because he almost engaged in a fatal error. It was all wrong. That wasn't the division. In fact, it was just like myself and my brother Ishmael. This one would have to be sifted out of the chosenness. And therefore, oh my goodness. Ay vey, woe is me. Look what I have done. Look what I almost did. Look how I have been caught. But look how I now know the truth. And in that moment, the Jewish history pivot and take a turn for the very good. And in that moment, the lineage, the pure, sifted filter, lineage and chosenness went from Avraham to Yitzhak and only to Yaakov Abinu, all because of the insights and the vision, the kindness and the braveness of the great mother, Rivka Imenu, who kept one of the greatest secrets in the history of the Jewish nation. Amen v'amen. Shabbat shalom.